In this recording, I'm going to show you how to work with shapes and fill them with color and gradients. So to get started, I'm just going to add a new layer, and I'm going to work first with the raster-based shapes. So these are the rectangular shapes here, the marquee shapes, and the lasso tool. So you draw a box, and there's a couple ways we can fill this. If you come here to the gradient tool, there's a paint bucket next to it, and you can just grab your swatches or your libraries that you've set here and add your color by just adding or just clicking inside of the selection, and the paint bucket will just fill that, and then you can go outside of it and Command D or just click outside of it. Next, I'm going to show you a keyboard command. So if I make a raster-based selection, I can click Option Delete or Control Delete on the PC. So that's another way that I can quickly just move really quickly through filling shapes throughout your composition. Next, I want to show you how you can work with the gradients. So if you're working with raster-based shapes, this gradient tool is specific to working with a raster shape. And the gradient tool is right here above the paint bucket tool. You'll see on the tool options menu bar here that I have access now to the gradient editor. I can change the color if I want, or use any of these presets in here. So if I want to use this gradient or this more purple one, or I can click on these small little squares and come over here and select my color that way, or I can come into my swatch panel and select my colors that way. You can change how much one color or the other color is prominent by sliding these sliders over to the right or the left, and you can add additional colors if you want. So say I want this to be super rainbowy. This could be my gradient. So I can save this as a new custom, or I can name it and then click OK. You can see that I haven't filled this yet. I was just making the gradient. In order to fill it, I need to be in the gradient tool and then click anywhere outside of the selection and drag, and then it will fill the gradient. I have these options of having a linear gradient or a radial gradient that it creates gradient from the middle out, and then a few different other versions that you can play with. They give you kind of variation of gradient options. So, so this is a really great way to work in terms of gradients for this particular kind of selection. So I can also do it with the lasso tool, and I go to my gradient and select one of these gradients that I just made and drag it. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is working with the vector-based shapes, which are over down here. These are vector-based shapes. So they basically can enlarge them or make them smaller without them losing quality. So I'm just going to drag this square, and you can see that the properties panel immediately pops open. This is giving me all the information about the length, the height, the width. And you can see that I have a fill and a stroke. I can change the size of this outline if I want. I can change the color. Say I want it to be kind of just a lighter green. I have to be clicked on the stroke here, and when I click on the stroke, I do have access to my swatches right here, so we could do like lighter colors, which is really nice. If I want to get rid of that stroke, I just want to click right here where this red line is going through, and that will give you, and I can also add a pattern to it. So if I want, I can add these patterns. I can also do this to the marquee shape as well. These are presets here in pattern, and you can pull this up and you can actually put it right in here to your side. Okay, the gradients operate a little differently than what I showed you in the marquee tool. So I need to get out of these patterns, and what I'm going to do is go into gradients and select a gradient. So you can work right here with the gradient toolbox in the properties panel, or in your gradient panel as well. These are all kind of pre-made gradients, and if you don't like them and you want to change it, you can come down here to your layer and double click on it, and what will come up is your gradient fill here. So you have options to come in here and select one of these, or all these different colors. You can click on here So your swatch panel here. So you might say you want purple, right? So you can see here that I have a vector shape and very simply added a gradient to it. Lastly, I want to show you that if you work with this gradient panel with the marquee selections or the lasso selections, and you go here to gradient, and if I add a gradient to it, immediately comes up. So that's super easy to work with. But what happens is Photoshop creates what's called a mask, and it masks out just the shape. If I disable this, you can see that it's actually the whole document is filled with the gradient, but it's created a mask. So in that mask, everything is masked out except the shape itself. This is fine, and actually it's a great way to work and a very simple way to work if you're working on imagery that's not going into the timeline. But these masks can kind of glitch out in a timeline. So there's other ways to construct your gradients that I just showed you and I went through that are better than this type of gradient layer for the timeline. So I would avoid this if that's possible. So these are the ways that you can fill your shapes, and I hope that you are able to experiment with these and have some fun with creating